everyone. Welcome back to the Book Club for Movies. It is Amy LaJoie and Samir Roy here. It is Tuesday, January 19th. My Instagram is back. Praise the interweb gods. Thank you, everyone, for the support for that. Really happy about it.
Yeah. Finally, you can update us with what's going on with Lydia.
I know. People have been dying to know Lydia, what I've been eating, what food I've been making. It's been terrible. It's just been terrible. It wasn't even a whole week, and it was just devastating. But I'm back. Really happy. Today we will be talking about legendary musical melodrama and comedy director Vincent Minnelli. Before we talk about him, yesterday we talked about Indian superstar Shah Rukh Khan and the 2002 rendition of Devdas. Oh boy, this movie. So I just finished this like 20 minutes ago.
I figured.
It's a 3-hour movie. I watched an hour of it last night. I watched the other 2 hours right before this, and wow, this movie is it's a lot. It's so dramatic.
It was the Indian melodramas are always like that. They're like horribly tragic and devastating at the end. They're like they really want to rip your heart out at the end. Like lovers almost never get happy endings in these Indian melodramas.
I was like, okay, they're eventually gonna get back together. That's where it's gonna go. Like somehow she's gonna get out of her marriage. And like, no, it's not what happened.
Especially not in the age of the Zamindar. Like women's roles are probably so much more restricted. You know, so that's why it's like in this, like, I mean, a lot of these movies, they use these kinds of setups to be like, look at the greatest injustice is, you know, any system that gets in the way of true love between two people. So it's always like horrible families and weird, like, you know, religious battles or there's always it's almost always like warring families. It's like I feel like almost every Indian film is a variation of Romeo and Juliet in some way. Sometimes they do commit suicide to be together at the end, or it ends like this where they're just like torn apart and nothing can bring them back together. Every now and then you do get a happy ending, but usually there's a lot of tragic consequences. And so these movies are like, look at how horrible this is that women were treated this way. I'm like, I'm glad that at least the people who make movies realize that and put it in the movies. It hasn't always translated over to the culture at large where they're like, yeah, we're going to change this patriarchal view of life. So there's like some shocking things in it that I think people would have been surprised by when you see the movie for the first time. But also like the biggest thing that just punches you in the face literally is like the style of this film.
Yeah. And having this being the first Bollywood movie I have seen in its entirety. So I can't say that this is all films, but I was really struck by how theatrical everything was. Like not just the musical performances, and those were definitely, I think, the highlights of the film, but all the dialogue was like, and I don't know if it was just like the translation of the lines was like, even the lines, like, and my mom came in, and she just watched like the last hour of it randomly, and I had to like catch her up on everything that was going on, and she's like, this dialogue is so weird.
It's all like these sort of philosophical, spiritual platitudes. Like every line is like, it's always something like, I'm not phrasing from the actual movie, but it's always like, the bird lands on the branch and when the leaf falls, you know, it's like all these kinds of like metaphors. And I'm like, does anybody just like say what they're thinking literally? No. In these kinds of fantastic melodramas, almost nobody speaks like that. At least in this one. This one I feel like it's basically taking every element of the classic Indian Bollywood melodrama and like amping it up.
It probably could have been an hour shorter if they just meant what they said.
I was just like happy to let this camera wander through all these amazing sets and locations. $7 million is all it cost to produce that. And you're like, how on earth could Steven Spielberg not get this level of opulence in an Indian palace in Temple of Doom with like way more money than that? I'm like, come on, they could do just all of this whole 3-hour movie for $7 million. you could have made like that is what the palace should have looked like in Temple of Doom. It should have looked like something like that. Because like even like the brothel, I'm like, you know, in today's day and age, I feel like anybody who's able to score permanent residence in a building like that would be looked at as successful in some way. But that is a thing of Indian culture, like the Nautch girl, the dance girl, like the woman who dances for money and to entertain men and so forth. You know, like that's like, oh, that's like symbolically you are a sex worker. And they actually say whore a lot in this movie, which I'm like, oh, I don't usually say it so directly, but like, this is where we are. It's the new millennium. So obviously Shah Rukh Khan is, I thought he was, my sister set me up to be like, oh, this isn't like his greatest performance. And I'm like, I thought he was actually pretty good.
I was surprised how little he sang in this. I felt like, you know, for him being the male lead, I felt like it took, I felt like we were like at least an hour in before he ever sang anything. And even then there was, I think only one song where you actually like saw his lyrics coming out of his mouth. The rest of it was just like, you would hear it, but they weren't actually, acting like they were
singing in the moment.
Yeah. So that was interesting. I think, yeah, he was pretty good in this, but I definitely was blown away by these two women here. I mean, besides I thought like their acting was good. Just breathtakingly beautiful. And I'm not going to remember their actual names, but the courtesan, like the way he is treated in this film is just like so absurd. And like, I mean, all women in this, and it's weird too, because it's like women hating other women too. And
you know, oh my God, like there's always an evil relative somewhere. So it's like the daughter-in-law who's like this evil, horrible creature who just like is obviously just jealous. It's like, okay, I guess if like the next daughter-in-law that potentially was coming in was going to be Aishwarya Rai, who would like completely overshadow her in every possible way in terms of the love relationship between the son and this woman, and also in terms of her beauty. You know, she's, you know, like obviously that other daughter-in-law would be totally eclipsed. So that was obviously her motive, even if she didn't really say it. You just kind of knew, like, oh, well, who would not choose Aishwarya, the nice one and the prettier one, to be their favorite in an Indian family?
The mother was an actress, so
and she really, I love
scandal.
I loved how her mom laid into his family, and she's like, "This is only Act 2." You know, I'm like, I love her. She's like a fabulous witch casting a spell on these people, and it's freaking working. I'm like, do not cross this woman. A woman of song and dance can weave magical spells. As you see when Madhuri starts dancing, like obviously Aishwarya Rai's first dance number at the beginning, it's like blows you away visually, and then you get to Madhuri in the brothel, and she is like, I'm not a heterosexual male. I felt like I was being like hypnotized and like sensuously drawn in by her
eyebrows. Like
that one moment where she does both eyebrows one after the other. I'm like, oh, she's a pro. That's not easy to do. But like seriously, I was like totally like, oh my God, I felt like I'm in love with you right now.
Yeah.
Like you're totally entranced by her. Like. And like you said, like you're like, she's been in retirement.
Yeah.
This is what she looked like when she came out of retirement for this movie. She was not like, she didn't, I think she was in her 40s, probably. Who knows? But like you saw also why she was like the dancing diva of Bollywood cinema. She was like,
and I'm assuming both of them, that was their real singing voices.
Usually not. Almost never.
Okay.
In Indian films, it's almost strictly playback singing, so it's always them lip syncing to another singer, and there's usually like a few singers who are very famous for doing like basically they're the voice of almost every Indian actress when they're singing in a film. So one was like Lata Mangeshkar was one of the most famous ones. I'm feeling terrible now because there's another really famous one whose name is escaping me right now, but there's like two women who like have done for years and years and years, did like all of these women's singing voices in these movies.
That's weird.
You know, just really stunning voices. Like it's very, very difficult to sing in the manner in which they sing. But yeah, almost every actor is basically a gifted lip syncer, which is like, why are there not more Indian drag queens? Like, this is like part of the lip syncing is part of the culture. Like, they should be slaying it. But we almost never see them.
But with Shah Rukh Khan, you said that he also tours and performs and sings. So do you think that was his voice?
I don't think so. I think he also was just lip syncing while he's dancing. And then there's like, bits with the audience and that kind of stuff. But like, I don't know. He would not be singing. I don't know how he could possibly sing and dance if he smokes as much as my sister's best friend told me.
I think they weren't actually singing while they were filming it.
No, I meant like on his stage shows. Yeah. On his stage shows, he wouldn't sing there and dance. I don't think physically he could handle that. But you can he still looks like almost exactly the same today as he does in this movie. Yeah. And we're 18 years on. I don't think any of these people have really aged that much from this poster. Oh. They look like almost exactly the same. But like, the reason I feel like this is such a great testament to like just how explosive and over the top and beautiful Indian cinema can be when you're just going for like a cinema spectacular. Like, it's not like going to be like the deepest emotional thing. This one, not particularly. There's others that are, really gut wrenching and heartbreaking. And, but I really wanted to show off like what like a big budget spectacular in India would look like. And he is the biggest spectacular of actors in this most spectacular looking of films. It was just so much. I actually watched it all in one sitting. I didn't have to take a break. I started way earlier than you did though. Yeah. I started like around like 6 o'clock, so I was done by 9.
Yeah, I like started it at 9 last night.
Yeah, so it makes sense. You chose it. Really, you could have stopped at any point, really, and would have been fine. There's plenty of drama still to come in those movies. There always is.
Well, this movie, if you didn't see it, sorry, I'm eating a muffin.
It's fine. It's fine.
If you didn't see it, this is available to rent on Prime. However, the one they have available on Prime, it's only in standard definition, and the image quality was pretty bad, actually. So you might want to try and find it. I know it was available on that other app.
Eros. Yeah, it's like International Cinema.
And I think Samir was saying yesterday there should be a free trial of that for a week. So if you want to check it out, I would recommend watching it on there. I mean, maybe it's the same image quality. I don't know, but on Amazon it was pretty bad. A little bit cheaper. It was a $3 rental, but I would pay the extra buck for it to be.
Yeah, I watched it in HD. So
yeah, this definitely was not HD. But enjoyable nonetheless. Quite the epic experience. Yeah, so check it out.
If you do check it out, definitely do not watch it in standard definition. You need to absolutely watch it in high definition. Because it's just wait till someday you'll see sequences of it in high definition, and like some of those scenes of like just like the festivals, like especially where the brothel was in that around that little waterway, and like the millions of candles lit everywhere.
Yeah, I mean it was still beautiful. It just wasn't quite as sharp as I would have liked it.
Someday, Amy. Someday.
Yeah, someday. But today is Director Tuesday, and we are talking about the fabulous Vincent Minnelli. He is an Oscar winner. He won Best Director for Gigi. He has directed 2 films that won Best Picture, An American in Paris and Gigi. Certainly known for his musicals. One of the best, if not the best, musical director of the golden age of Hollywood. I mean, it's like him, Stanley Donen, Busby Berkeley, all of these people, Ernst Lubitsch. These are all these top people, and they all had their own distinct styles, and he was definitely one of them. He was born Lester Anthony Minnelli, February 28th, 1903 in Chicago. I think his dad looks like he had some sort of musical or theatrical background as well.
Yeah, they used to do theater tent like productions, and like the family would be in them. together. So they would sometimes be musicals that they copied from other stage musicals, or stuff they copied from movies and made a play out of or something. So they were all like a very theatrical family.
While he was in Chicago after he graduated high school, he became, among other jobs, he was a photographer, and he specialized photographing actors in the Chicago theater district. That's how he got really interested in theater. Eventually, he moved to New York and started working in theater there. Kind of like he would do stage production, um, costume design, set design, and everything like that. Eventually, I think he started directing his own plays. His first one was in 1935. It was called At Home Abroad, and that was a musical. Um, in 1940, after doing a few big Broadway things there, including the Ziegfeld Follies of 1936, he was offered a job at MGM by producer Arthur Freed. Anyone who likes MGM musicals knows who Arthur Freed is.
Arthur Freed.
He was almost a director himself as far as like his influence that he had on these films, but any musical was under the Arthur Freed unit, and he was just like his own, like, you knew it was going to be quality. And we should probably do a Man Crush Monday on him at some point, because he was just his own cool guy.
Possibly, although there are some problematic things, very dark problematic things in his life. We're
going to talk about that afterwards. I don't know. Last time I was learning about Arthur Freed was almost a year ago, when I picked Singing in the Rain for like the first week or so of the movie talk. And on my Singing in the Rain Blu-ray, there's a documentary on Arthur Freed, and I was watching that, and I don't remember any problematic things, but they could have just left them out. So let's talk about that.
Stuff that maybe came to light recently, some like mayor-esque stories. I can't remember. I have to look it up before we really have our conversation on that. But there's a lot of stuff packed into Vincent Minnelli's life that I think lead to the kind of artist he was when he started making movies. So he actually, I think his first major job in Chicago, when he graduated high school, he left small town Ohio, and went to Chicago like right away. And I think I don't know where or how his sketches were noticed, but he was also very accomplished like visual artist in terms of sketching and painting. And so his sketches started to get noticed by people, and actually got him a job at Marshall Field's department store, designing their window displays. And of course, we all know what a window display really is doing. It's either just an excuse for a store to put out their nicest items and just displayed prettily to catch someone's eye with just the prettiness of the items, or they're really telling a story. There's like a full narrative that you're sort of building in a still life with those window displays. So he really sort of honed this skill of decorating every inch of the frame to tell a story, to lure in people. So he was already sort of creating screens, in that shape. Like, that's the shape of a window is similar to the shape of a movie screen. So he's already kind of like putting things in front of it, displaying them as they would be seen on a screen in a way. So that was sort of built in. And he used to like design costumes. I think he actually even designed the costumes for Josephine Baker's return to the U.S. in that Ziegfeld Follies of 36. So he also had that relationship with African-American artists, like a very intimate artistic relationship with them, with African-American artists in Hollywood and on Broadway. That sort of, I think maybe that lent into, because was Cabin in the Sky his first?
It was.
Movie?
So Cabin in the Sky is one that we have almost put, we actually almost picked it for a Lena Horne Day, and we might do it next month. But Cabin in the Sky we'll talk about it, but I want to watch it. But it was his first feature film in Hollywood. I think the entire cast, or almost the entire cast, is African American. Supposedly he had a fling with Lena Horne. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a fling with Lena Horne? My God, she's incredible.
Thank you.
He kept making films from there. I mean, that was at MGM, obviously. Eventually, he married Judy Garland, of course. They had met on the set of Strike Up the Band in 1940, which is a Busby Berkeley musical. And they married not too long after Meet Me in St. Louis in 1944. That was certainly his most famous marriage, but he was married 3 other times. Yeah, but obviously known for his musicals. I mean, American in Paris, Brigadoon, Gigi, and then we have things like Father of the Bride, The Bad and the Beautiful, Lust for Life, and today's film, which is The Cobweb. So, I mean, the obvious choice for picking up one movie for our Director Tuesday for him would be a musical, but we're not doing that because he has so many other things that he has done. And I don't think I had seen any of his other films that aren't musicals. So this will be something for me.
Ooh.
But what is you talk about him? You're the
I'm not. I know we know the same stuff usually, but I just always related to. Obviously, I had the same sort of entree into his work that you do, which is strictly through the musicals.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I saw the movie Tea and Sympathy, because that's a very controversial play for anyone who's read it knows why it's controversial, mostly for its depiction of, or at least its attitude towards homosexuality, which is the play is one of those plays that sort of expands what it could be to what it means to maybe be a man in a socially gendered society, how you're allowed to behave and how you're not allowed to behave, how you're allowed to love and not love, and so forth. But it also says like, oh, well, the character is still straight at the end, so he's still normal. It's kind of like I'm like, okay, well, thanks for that unnecessary editorializing on whether or not gay people are normal, but I could do without that. But it was a really powerful story because it also is questioning how you define gender in a way. Like, why is this sensitive musical kid who's like, I remember in the play, it was like he was really good at tennis, but he wasn't overpowering opponents. He was beating them with strategy and using spin and like other things besides just brute force to win. And he always won, but everyone sort of looked down on him because he wasn't using muscular strength to overpower people. So it was like all these levels of like, oh, these are all the different ways in which being a man in a gendered society is defined. And this is the effects on somebody who doesn't fit that very rigid mold. And why is this person being punished just because he doesn't fit that mold? It's an unjust way to, it's like, so it has all these really positive things. And so when Vincent Minnelli made a movie of that, I feel like there was some aspect of his sexuality and questioning and all, the ideas about gender that sort of made that movie really special to him in a way, even if he retained the problematic ending. Mm-hmm. Because he was someone who was known in theater. He would go out in full makeup sometimes, like people, but like you said, he was married numerous times. There's definitely some bisexuality there. Like I just remember when I found that movie, I was like, oh, Vincent Minnelli makes dramas. And like, who knew? And so then I started looking up, trying to find his dramas, and they're not as easy to find as his musicals.
Yeah, and even one of from 1945, there's this film, The Clock, which I still want to watch, and that's on the Turner Classic Movies app. That's one with Judy Garland. I hadn't even heard of that movie. And being like a huge Judy Garland fan, I was like, how have I even heard of this movie? And it's probably because it's not a musical.
Right. And so it's just insane because that's how I found The Clock also, was because I found Tea and Sympathy. I was like, oh, I should really look up more of his films. And I found like, oh, look at this movie. And I'd read about The Clock. I heard it was super cute. And it had the actor that was in Strangers on a Train in a non-psychotic role with Judy Garland. I was like, oh. And then the movie was really, really wonderful. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm missing out on these other movies. And I watched Bad and the Beautiful, which is one of the best movies made about creative people in Hollywood, like ever. Oh, see, Walter agrees. It's amazing. It's like best performance Lana Turner ever gave as a dramatic actress before her star persona sort of took over. Like Vincent Minnelli, like got that performance out of her. Like, so
like it's trying to get me to watch that movie for like a year, and I
know she'll love it, and she just.
I know. Yeah, but
it's so worth it. But I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then you get to when he discovers CinemaScope. So his first CinemaScope film is the movie we made today. And it's like, oh, will you give an artist like this who knows how to use every inch of the frame to tell a story and can pack so much detail to tell you things visually, When you give him even more space to use, like just imagine what he can do. And I feel like this movie, it's subtle, but I think it's mind blowing the way he uses widescreen space in this film and color. There's one shot that I talked to you about numerous times before this where like there's I think 30 different characters in one room, and they are all posed and situated in a way that feels organic, like it's the way all these people would sit with their independent personalities displayed in the way they're posed in the room. But the camera moves through, just like that he can fit that much story into one frame. To me, it was mind-blowing because you really could focus on any one of those people and get a sense of who that character is, what their issue is, and you just understand it just by looking at it. Like it's a really magical power. He was very bad about explaining his movies. He could not talk articulately about them. He just knew how to make them brilliant. Lust for Life, as Walter mentioned, is another great one. Like you take Vincent van Gogh and Vincent Minnelli, like doing a movie about him, like you can only imagine how fantastic that movie will be. And it was. But I really wanted to start with this one because this one particularly is almost never available. And it popped up on the Criterion app as part of a psychoanalysis, like group of films about psychoanalysis or something. But tell us what it's about, because it's a really weird movie.
Well, I wanted to add two things really quick. So, yeah, Vincent Minnelli, he did direct several actors in Oscar-winning performances. So he still kind of has a few Oscars to his name. And that's interesting what you were saying about CinemaScope, because in my mind, I'm always thinking about musicals. And I always just like, okay, Vincent Minnelli, Stanley Donen, and from what I remember reading in Dancing on the Ceiling, Stanley Donen's almost autobiography, he did not like CinemaScope when it came out. I remember him reading it. He was just like, what am I going to do with all of this? So it's interesting that just shows that they were both just very different directors and different styles, and one of them loved it. One of them was like, I mean, if I have to use it, sure, but I don't like it.
Stanley Donen did find good artistic uses for it later in the 50s. He figured it out. But Vincent Minnelli, I think he maybe have just been a little more accustomed to working with different aspect ratios. I mean, imagine like, okay, you're going to do the window on this side of the building. Now you're going to do this big window on the main street. It's like he probably has already thought of visual stories in these different shapes. So it's like, oh, now I have more space to even stretch out what I want to do more and fill in even more detail. So you're going to get like lots of really brilliant uses of color, really bold colors, really brilliant camera work that sometimes feels almost like incessant in a way. Like it sort of doesn't give you a sense of easy relief. It always seems to be moving a little, just slowly in or out or around things. So it kind of creeps almost in a way in this movie. So it gives you a slightly unsettled feeling from the get-go. But there's a certain, there's also really interesting architectural details throughout that have some sort of really sort of symbolic magic within the story. They draw your eye. He always draws your eye really brilliantly to all these different things. He has an obsession with record players, I've read. There's always a record player in his movies somewhere in some way. Possibly the music element of it makes it still appealing to him. But I mean, melodrama, musicals, melodrama literally means drama with music. I mean, he's obviously proven his mettle and working in that medium. I just think this is such a strange movie that the plot sort of tells you how weird it is.
Yeah. Okay. So this came out in 1955. At a private psychiatric clinic, the daily dramas and interactions between the doctors, nurses, administrators, benefactors, and patients are accentuated by the personal and family crises of these individuals. And this has an all-star cast: Richard Widmark, the fabulous Lauren Bacall, Charles Boyer, Gloria Graham, who was her Woman Crush Wednesday back in... I think we did that. Was that in August or September when we had our Mobster Week? She was our Woman Crush Wednesday that week.
September, I think.
John Kerr, and so many more.
Yeah, Lillian Gish in this movie is great. She's she plays a character named Vicky Inch. Her last name is Inch, but she's the most like a disagreeable character, one of the most disagreeable characters I've ever seen in a movie. Like everything just sets her off on an angry tirade in some way. And it's like this movie, it feels like, so like the whole concept is kind of like, well, this posh asylum could probably, you know, be more helpful if the people running it had their shit together more than the patients. Because it's like they're all lined up as dominoes, and like one little thing just pushes one over, and all of them come scrambling down. Gloria Graham also is like with brown hair is a really weird sight in this movie.
See, I'm used to her with brown hair because the first thing I ever saw her in was Oklahoma.
See, I always saw her as she usually played characters with blonde hair in most of her films, because I think that was her natural color, or at least the one that she went with for most of her life. So it's